You recording?
Yep.
Welcome to the official, unofficial Sea of Thieves podcast, a podcast dedicated to Sea of Thieves and other rare games, but mainly Sea of Thieves. Today we have another great episode since we will be discussing Season 6. Well, at least part of it. This episode is all about the sea forts that have been dragged from the Sea of the Damned. We will discuss both the good and the bad of this new edition. We will look at it from a gameplay perspective, but there's also a little room to do some lore speculations. And even though a Shiny Ray couldn't make it for this episode, we do have another exciting returning guest.
Hey everyone, Captain Logun here. Welcome to this awesome podcast. Happy to be back.
It feels weird to be a guest, right?
It does. I don't have to do nearly as much prep work as I usually do, which I'm okay with from time to time.
I just need to wake up early and talk.
That's fine. I got coffee. You guys are gonna get my morning voice, so it's gonna be a lot deeper.
Even deeper, even sexier. You only get that on this podcast. For those that aren't aware, you are a returning guest. Just a couple episodes before you were here as well. That was the wishes for 2022. So if you haven't listened to that episode, it still holds up. And I believe none of our wishes came true yet. So it's still very relevant.
There's always hope.
Yeah, there's always hope, yeah, for my striped pants. For those that aren't in the know, can you tell us a little bit what your content is about?
Yeah. So if you don't know, I do a Sea of Thieves podcast. I've been doing it since February of 2018. It's a predominantly solo show, but what I like to do is I like to bring on community members as well as rare devs to talk about their experience, either like who they are and how they got into Sea of Thieves, or what makes their content interesting. I like to kind of showcase folks in the community to kind of give them a chance to do the spotlight, while also focusing heavily on like what's going on with the actual game. I love to do like the updates and talk about the lore. I love diving into lore with the game. So as far as that content goes, that's predominantly what I do. But I also do an Xbox podcast that I just started up too. So if you enjoy gaming news in general, I also do an Xbox wrap up podcast that tries to cover everything that happens within 1 week, within 1 hour, so that if you don't have time to keep up on everything that's going on in the games industry, but you're like me, you're interested in that, I try to kind of keep all that covered as well too. So basically what I do for Sea of Thieves, but just kind of a little more broadened.
I didn't even know you started an Xbox podcast.
Yeah, really early. So I think I'm only about 10 episodes in, so still very fresh.
All right. Well, you do post more frequently your episodes. Doesn't matter what podcast it is. Which is also a good tip for everybody who can't get enough of podcasts. You should definitely listen to Captain Logun and Keelhauled Podcast. Like you said before, they get the developers on. Something we're working on still. So yeah, let's dive into our main discussion, and that is all about these sea forts. 6 of them have appeared over the seas. Each region has their own style, but the layout is pretty much the same. Players will face off against a wave of phantoms, and in the last wave there's a phantom captain. He drops the key for the big loot pile, and you can also find additional loot by searching the crates and furniture. So, Captain Logun, what's your general impression of these forts?
I love them. I think that they are bringing an aesthetic to Sea of Thieves that we haven't seen before. Predominantly everything in Sea of Thieves is made up of like the scrap wood from ships. Just look at Reaper's Hideout, look at any of the shops. Everything is all wood based, and it makes sense because most people get to Sea of Thieves on ships, and most of those ships are all made out of wood. So it only makes sense that when you don't need a ship and you're setting up shop, you might as well chop them up and use the wood for it. So having structures and not just the kind of rubble that we find on like top of Wonder's Refuge, or there's always been a few hints that at some point they had stone structures, and we get some of this with some of the ancients as far as like Tribute Peak, but to have like a lived in kind of colonial style sea fort it's made out of stone. It's got really nice furniture in there. They've really done a good job of decorating these. it's such a it kind of feels like a step forward. We're progressing through time. We're getting to the point where we're having more established set pieces to be able to play around in Sea of Thieves, and it excites me because or at least for me, we've always seen videos back when they were building Sea of Thieves in the Unity engine when they were testing things out. And atop Wanderers, or no, excuse me, I guess it was Smuggler's Bay. Smuggler's Bay actually had a fort on it that they actually, were prototyping, what you could do with the fort and stuff like that. And I'd always wanted to have islands that had forts and stuff. And while I think that it's good because islands have a lot going on as far as like spawn points and quests and booby traps and wildlife and stuff, it seems really weird to try and shoehorn in a sea fort or a fort that's as big as what we have into those islands. It's nice to kind of see these out on their own. They're kind of isolated, but at the same time, they're active enough that you really can just venture into them whenever and still manage to find one that has something going on that you can go and engage with. But I think Rare's done a really good job of thinking about how players are actually going to want to use these structures. They put a lot of time into that kind of stuff. So as far as like general overall broad kind of feelings on the sea forts, I think they've done a really amazing job. I think this is probably some of the best thought out content we've seen since, I would say, Heart of Fire, Tall Tale, not including like Pirate's Life in my opinion, but in-game stuff that you can do on a repeatable basis.
Interesting to hear that. Like when listening to your podcast, you're mostly enthusiastic about, all the updates. What I get from, my own community and the people I sell with, people are pleased with them, but really moderately pleased, like not very excited about them. But it sounds to me that you are very excited about them.
Yeah, I think these are a good addition. It's clear that they've put a lot of thought into this. I think some of the points that we're going to dive into as far as like, some questions about sea forts are really going to kind of tease out some of my reasonings behind this. But it feels like this is 4 years worth of experience being built into one sea fort, and it feels lived in. It feels like each one has a personality, especially if you wander around them enough. You start to see some of the little eccentricities about each one, and start to notice like one of the ones in the wilds has the bottom floor, which is where the little treasury is, and the ceiling is all stone, whereas not all of them are all stone. Some of them have wood paneling in the ceiling for the top of the floor, for the floor above it. But the one that has a stone in it actually shows that it's made of stone, but it acts as though it would if it were in a enclosed environment with water in a moisture area, and there's water that actually drops from the ceiling because of condensation. And it's a little thing like that I noticed, and I was like, because I kept seeing like these little drops, and I couldn't tell if it was my mind playing with me or if it was actually something. So I just kind of stood there and watched, and sure enough, on a timer they've got a little drip, and the drip is constant enough to make you realize it's like, no, that's a little detail that they didn't have to put in, but it does kind of tell an overall story that these are forts that are out in the middle of the ocean. There's going to be roof or stone ceilings, and that stone is going to fluctuate in temperature. It's going to cause condensation, so of course there's going to be water that drips from it. So I think that they've done a lot to build these up. Now, whether or not people engage with them on a regular basis, I think is the real question. I assume that a lot of people will probably move on once they've completed all the commendations for them. But just as a set piece that's put in the world compared to what we're used to with either Tall Tales or Threats or Islands, we really don't have a whole lot that gets put into the world that's a set piece. Like shrines and treasuries are kind of the last time we saw that. And then we've got the fortress for the Tall Tales out in the middle of nowhere that no one ever goes to anymore. But these are always going to be in the world. And I think when they do that, they need to be very special. And I think they've done a really special job with the forts.
Yeah, you bring up a good point too. Like, when are people done with this? because now it's all fun. The season has just came out. Everybody is doing these forts. Same with the quest board too. That really failed miserably. As soon as people were done with accommodations, as expected, nobody would be doing them anymore. I think it's going to be a little bit different for these forts because you do get like a nice amount of loot actually, and if you're experienced players, you can really stack these forts and make some big money. Plus the fact that the supplies are very high, so I think people are inclined to start their adventures off with just a sea fort also to get their supplies ready for for their session. So I think that's the difference between these forts compared to the treasuries, I feel.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's way more fun to jump on, buy a backpacker or swing by an island on the way to one to try and find one of those little storage crates. And if you can bring one of those to a sea fort after you're done, not only do you get enough money to pay for the actual storage crate, but you also get 150 cannonballs, some really good meat, and enough planks to handle just about whatever you're going to be tackling. So I think this is I've taken to grabbing or jumping online, and if I'm going to be doing a short session, I usually don't grab any supplies. I just go to the sea fort, and if it's going to be a longer session, I'll just grab the sea fort or the storage crate, and then we'll go do a sea fort. We'll get some treasure, and it's so much more fun than trying to just run from barrel to barrel to barrel to barrel to barrel to barrel to barrel, trying to decide like, okay, what are we going to do tonight? It's like, nah, we'll throw an emissary flag down. Doesn't matter what it is, because the sea forts have a little bit of everything, and we go supply up at a sea fort. And I think that's so much more engaging than whether or not the barrels are going to reset soon on an outpost.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And every sea fort is also pretty close to an outpost, so it's a perfect starting point. Aren't you afraid they are going to lower the supplies in the forts? Do you think they're going to tweak it?
I hope not. And I don't think they will, because you can always buy supplies. So even if you wanted to have a whole bunch of supplies, that functionality is already built into the game. And I mean, you before it was sea forts, we would go do the same thing back in the first year. We'd go raid a regular skeleton fort back before all of them were turned on. And we had to go supply up for cursed sales. We would go get our 300 cannonballs, but we would do it 10 cannonballs at a time. And then we would all, sail out to the area where cursed sales was. And then we'd get immediately sunk by the first wave and lose all of our supplies. So I think the idea that I think that Rare's original plan of wanting to get you out into the world and supply on the way has kind of remained true. I don't think that's changed. I think some of the caveats that we've seen has helped get us onto the seas, as far as like being able to buy storage crates, increasing the base amount of supplies on a ship. I think things like that have helped with the time to action. But I don't think that they're going to be adjusting the supplies. I think very much like the rest of sea forts, everything about them has been very well thought out. Plus, they're also anticipating that people are going to want to role play with these and defend a fort against invaders. And to do that, you need supplies. And the best way to do that is to keep the supplies at what they're at currently.
Yeah, you mentioned that people are going to role play. I have an incredibly double feeling about that, because we want our own hideout. That's been a wish of us for most players since day one. And I always envisioned it differently than we're getting it now. But Rare is really selling it as, hey, this can be your fort if you want to role play. But there's nothing attached to that. Like it doesn't go that much further than role playing. So it feels like a solution to a wish that only grants it halfway.
Yeah, I can see that. But at the same time, the benefit is that this is stage one. This is just the beginning. We just barely got sea forts. Now, if they want to add a way for you to change your spawn point so that it's based on where you fall asleep. So if you want to sleep in one of the bunk beds, you can lose your ship at a sea fort and not worry because your respawn will be tied to wherever you fell asleep. Subsequently, this is also going to serve as an interesting play style for the fact that a lot of players that went to Arena were using Arena as a TDM. They would always, the rule was, or the unspoken rule was, is that you sailed over to whatever fort was in the arena, and then you would go and you would TDM there. And all of your person-to-person PvP was done there. Now these forts serve as an opportunity for you to be able to do that without needing a special server. You just need to be able to spawn in whatever number of ships you can at the same time to be able to get the crewmates that you want, or just have it set up so that your ship is hiding off somewhere, and or you can park it on the back of the fort and then raise a Reaper flag, and then if people want to come PvP with you, they can come PvP with you. And if you want to set it up so that you can do TDM, you can do TDM. And it helps kind of replace the thing that was what people found in Arena, but within Adventure, without needing the additional resources to maintain an entire different mode.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not one of those people. I need real rewards for the things I do in the game. To come back to your own hideout, like I've never really talked about this before on my channel, so I'll really quickly plug my idea of a personal hideout. I would like a hideout that's on a different server, kind of like how the Maiden Voyage is. So you have it for you yourself. It's a solo experience, but everything you do in adventure impacts the way how your fort locks. So if you unlock certain accommodations, it will reflect in your personal hideout. So if you defeated, I don't know, like 50 hungering ones, you will get the jaws of a megalodon in your hideout. Or if you done, I don't know, the Glitterbeard quest, there's a like a hurdy-gurdy, like a painted hurdy-gurdy in the corner of your hideout. And also there's a big cave area that reflects the amount of gold you have. And the more millions you have, the bigger that gold pile gets. The kind of like how Fable 3 did it. So that's how I always envisioned a sea fort, something that evolves together with your pirate.
I can see that. The trouble is that the game is driven by cosmetics and gameplay.
Yeah.
And what good are the cosmetics if you can't show those off to other people outside of your crew?
No, I don't care. I just want it for myself.
I think that's the struggle is they're looking to build cosmetics that can be shown off to everyone. So it does kind of like say like, hey, I was here during the Hungering One. I have the original Hungering One's jaws after we defeated them. And those are hanging up in my fort. But I can't prove it because you would have to be on my crew to be able to see that. And my crew is there, so we already knew.
I guess so. I still like my idea a lot.
I totally see why. It's exactly what you would want, and I like the idea of being able to sail out of your own kind of thing. But at the same time, I think of it like, if they did that and it was just if they took Arena and they just changed it to be your fort, and they gave you the option to either spawn into your fort, which would be like a version of the Arena, and then transfer into Adventure. If you've only got a certain limited amount of time to play, are you really going to want to jump into your fort, or are you just going to jump into Adventure?
Yeah, of course, jump into Adventure. It should be something that you only visit like a couple of times each season to see how it progressed, and then post pictures and flex.
And if that's the case, not everyone's social online. A lot of people play and never share a photo of it at all. And at that point, if you're only visiting a couple times a season, is that worth the development cost?
For me, it is. For me, it definitely is. It ties into that pirate fantasy, and I still have that itch. And how awesome these forts are for role playing. It, my itch doesn't get scratched by this. But that's me.
I think
Um,
if I were to pose as rare, I think I would want to give the ability to customize my ship first before
mhm,
giving a fort or like a hideout. Because there's a lot that can be done with a ship that you can customize now, but nothing that is unique to your pirate outside of time limited cosmetics. Nothing about the ship actually tells a story of where you've been or what you've done. And with ships being the most expensive resource in the game, if that's the thing that is going to persist forever, and that is the thing that people are going to engage with the most, and I would want to be able to change up my ship
mm,
first to reflect the history of my character, as opposed to try and have like a thing that I have to be like, hey, you want to come see my, I promise I won't drug you and take you down into my fort, but do you want to come check out my fort? I got a really cool thing. I think I would rather have like people be able to get onto my ship, see my captain's cabin, see all the things that I've done in there, or even like the bottom of my ship. If you've done a whole bunch of gold hoarder missions and you're a gold hoarder, the bottom of your galleon, instead of barrels, there could be chests that are unlootable and piles of gold that are unlootable, and you can
mm,
customize the bottom of your hull so that your hulls are bursting with swag.
Yeah, that does sound really cool. And they did also experiment with paintings in the past on ships.
Yeah,
So hopefully we'll get to see that in the main game as well eventually.
yeah.
But we will see. Let's get back to the topic at hand, these sea forts. Let's talk a little bit about balancing because even though we really like the forts and I feel like they're a cool experience for experienced players, let's be fair, they are a bit more catered towards the newer players. Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't.
Oh, all right.
I think newer players are going to have a tough time with this. I think newer players could also have a very easy time. I think it's going to depend on their gaming experience. These are a little bit easier enemies to kill, but I think that I'm okay with that because the function or the design of these, the balance isn't necessarily how difficult this is. They weren't trying to make Soul or Dark Souls the Sea Fort. They were trying to make something that you can get in and out on a time. Like the difficulty is time. If it's more difficult for you, then it's going to take 45 minutes to an hour to complete because you'll be dying. If it's easy for you, then you'll be able to knock it out in 20-30 minutes and it won't be a problem.
Even faster than that. Like we can do it in less than 10, and I think even faster than that, to be honest.
Depends on how many people you got. I can do it in about 25 minutes. And that's
Mm,
sailing out, defeating it, loading up all the treasure, sailing back, and selling all the treasure. The fort
mm,
itself, as far as like the actual waves go, you get 5 waves of about 10 to 12 skeletons or phantoms each. The phantoms have about half the health of a normal pirate, so it doesn't take much to kill them. But yeah, the waves of fight or the waves of phantoms themselves is only about 10 minutes worth of content.
mm,
But again, I'm okay with that because the goal of these was to be in and out, and that's why they're on such a
yeah.
fast respawn. It's not because
Yeah.
they're trying to create challenging content. If you want challenging content, you can go do the gold hoarder if you want, or you can go throw down a tall tale for Briggsy, or you can go do a skeleton fort or a fort of fortune. There's already hard enough content in the game for newer players and for experienced players, and going to do a FOF without a bunch of bubble wands is a lot harder than if you go and you stock up on a whole bunch of bubble wands from a treasury. So
Mm.
it's not
All
that
right.
Sea of Thieves is not lacking for hard content. It needs easier content, if anything. And I don't think this is easy. I think it's easier. I think it's time based. They just wanted you to have a quick in and out for a 30-minute thing, which you could do with Arena, but you can't anymore. And you need something
Mm.
like that to replace it.
Yes, it's interesting because I disagree.
That's fine.
I obviously agree that these are faster experiences and they are made easier on purpose, but like all the other experiences are quite easy in my experience. Well, I wouldn't say anything is hard in this game except PvP.
But
Um,
isn't that a very personal perspective?
yeah, I think it is.
I
Yeah.
mean, we'll take Sightless Combat or Sour Scar, two players with accessibility issues. They don't get the benefit of having your way of playing the game. They have to play with exceptions, which makes
Yeah.
normal content already harder for them than it should be. So if they're given something that is easier to you and harder for them, but is still easier compared to regular content, then from their perspective, it is very balanced.
Mm. Yeah, but isn't it so that, a lot of games are by definition harder for them because they have a disability?
True. So if anything, that makes this content more accessible than the rest of the content in Sea of Thieves, which wouldn't it be better if everyone could enjoy it as opposed
Oh
to
yeah,
just the people that can handle really hard content?
well, obviously, and I'm all for accessibility, don't get me wrong. But the way I've been told it is that, a lot of the PvE is meant to be somewhat easy because that's not where the difficulty from this game comes from. It comes from the PvP. Because people always need to have, loot on their ships to make the PvP interesting. If this challenge is too hard to get, treasure in the first place, then the PvP would have no meaning because you will be finding empty ships, and that's also not the purpose of the game, I think.
I again would push back and say that we already have things like the Fort of the Damned, the Fort of Fortune. We have harder content. If you don't believe me, just go out to the Devil's Roar. It's always a pain to try and get anything done out there in any measurable amount of time if you're actually waiting for volcanoes, or you could just sail in and actually try and, bear the burden of a volcano and see how it goes. There's
Mm,
definitely hard PvE content out there. It's just a lot of people don't typically engage with it unless they're ready for that kind of content. And
mm,
it always kind of goes back to perspective. What's easy for you is not easy for everyone. So for me, dealing with a normal fort is easy, but I've also been playing this game for 4 years. So
yeah.
watching my friends who are streaming, they're tucking on a Fort of Fortune, and they're watching a brig crew take an hour and accomplish nothing
Mm,
on this Fort of Fortune, and just
yeah.
waiting for them to finish it so they can steal it, and having them lose an entire hour's worth of sailing because this crew could not progress through the Fort of Fortune. Like there's content that's hard for people out there, especially if they don't know what they're doing.
Mhm.
So I always try to look at things from the lens of the casual player, not the sweats like us.
Yeah. I try to, obviously, since I write my reviews for these seasons, and you always need to balance it. Like, all right, so I feel this, but what does it mean for, the general player base? Like, how will they react with this? Like, is this a fun first time, or will it put them off? But still, it can be hard sometimes, since you're so used to, playing well and playing with experienced people.
Well, I think there's an opportunity for Rare to take something like a Sea Fort and augment it so that you can spawn in harder mobs too. There's no
Mm,
reason why we couldn't get into it in a little bit, but some of the interesting possibilities for this is we've seen things in promotional material that isn't in the game yet that seems to be tied to the Sea Forts. We've also seen things in Sea Forts that might suggest that, much like the Fort of the Damned, there's a possibility to mess around with stuff. And
mm,
there's always a potential that they could be planning a harder version of a fort, and they're giving players time to experience what a normal fort is so that they can get comfortable with the layout, get comfortable with where things are, where they are in the world, just finding them. But I always push back and say, go look at the percentage for completion for basic achievements, and when you look at
mhm,
the thing that's like set sail or eat a banana, and that's like at 50% completion, half of the
mm.
people that play the game don't ever get off the outpost. And that's
Yeah, that's true.
they're trying to make the game more accessible for everyone who's just jumping in, because as a game as a service is one of the temples for Xbox right now. They have to make sure that the content that they put in is something that anyone can engage with, especially if it's going to be on the front page of Game Pass and they're like, hey, come check out Seaforts. And then they get in there and they have a heck of enough time just getting to a Seafort or finding a Seafort. They get there, it's too hard, and then they drop the game. That's a lost customer. And this is a business. They do need to keep people in the game buying content to be able to sustain it.
Yep, no, I totally agree. And these forts are really well designed because a lot of new players they don't really bother with doing the voyages. They just want to sail instead, explore. And these forts, like I said, are close to any outpost. They also have this ghostly fog that glows up, so people spot it and say, "Hey, what's that?" Instead of a big skull in the sky that they probably can't complete yet. They see this sea fort from a distance, something they can engage with and can finish in their first session. So I feel some thought went into that, and I think they done a good job on that part.
Yeah, I definitely like the fog and the flags. I think were a really good way to kind of indicate what's going on. I noticed the flag originally, and I didn't read the patch notes until later on, and I was looking at it and I was like, oh yeah, the flag does change. Although I do kind of agree with the community. I think we should be able to raise up our own flag that kind of acts as a Reaper's mark without it technically being a Reaper's mark. I would love to be able to have like one of the flags that we have for our ship you can raise as the flag for the fort. I would love to have a flag box.
It wouldn't be that hard. Yeah, just put a flag box at the top and make it interactable.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice. There's some other stuff that I want to touch up because you said you can also find meat on the fort, and a lot of players don't know where that meat is located. So can you enlighten us?
Yeah. So if you guys are heading to any of the forts, you can find a lot of the really good food in the barrels that are on the cranes. Rare did a really good job of building in some of the immersion. So you'll see a lot of loading cranes on the outskirts of the dock itself for the forts. And you can actually interact with them. Go over, grab the pulleys. You can do so with the way that you can kind of load and unload treasure in the bottom of the treasury. So if you go over to them, you can pull the barrels over. There's like 3 to a stack or a wrap or whatever they call them. And inside you can typically find a bunch of, fish and actual meat and stuff like that inside of those. And there's 4 stoves in the actual fort, and you can actually go cook them all up if they're not already cooked. And I think that's a smart play. I think that's a great way to help kind of incentivize players to head over there and try and loot and interact with everything. Because if you interact with it, you wouldn't be able to loot these unless you brought your ship over to them directly. But because you can swing them over to dry land, then you can actually interact with them and stuff. And it's kind of like a teaching moment. You go over, you play around with it, and you get rewarded, and you're like, oh, now I know I can actually bring these cranes over and stuff. So keep an eye out for those.
Indeed, very good tip. Another tip is fishing for pondies. Apparently, if you go downstairs in the little, indoor pool they have there, you can fish for pondies if you still need them.
Yeah, it's a really good way to do it. Actually,
doesn't really make that much sense since it's still salt water. But,
sea of thieves, mate.
We'll
sea of thieves.
Fish live everywhere. There's no problem. This makes me hope for for hippos in saltwater. It's a possibility in this game.
Yeah.
So a few more topics. Something else that's inside the forts that I thought was really interesting is card games. Like we've seen before in some tall tales, like cards are scattered around, but they're very at the forefront in the fortress too. In the dining area, you see people playing card games. So do you think that's a hint to future content?
I don't.
You don't?
Okay. No, and I think it's because of the rating for the game. Gambling, I think, kicks it up to a mature rated game, and I think that they can only keep this at a teen rated game. So I think there's legal implications as to why we don't have card games in Sea of Thieves. And I think
is there really, because we had Defrin on the podcast too, and he brought up the same argument. And I get that if you play with real money, that's an issue, and you should never do that. But if it's like with or in-game currency gold, then it should be no problem, right?
No, because it's still gambling. Gambling itself is something that brings the rating up, because it's not about what you're wagering. It's about the act of gambling is considered something that is a mature rated. You have to be an adult to gamble in real life, and they don't want that simulated in games. So only games that are mature rated have gambling in them. You can only have a teen rating if you don't have. You can have like implied violence and implied drinking, but you can't do. It's why the dice emotes that we got were all for Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. They were all multi-sided dice. It wasn't like a liar's dice game. So you can't gamble in games without it being a mature rated game. And that's kind of across the board. So it's one of the reasons I think they gave at one of the Comic Cons forever ago when it was asked if we were going to be getting liar's dice from the Tales of Sea of Thieves book into the game. And they said that they wouldn't be able to because of rating.
I wasn't aware of that. It's sad. I felt these were definitely teases to card games coming to the games, but sadly not.
Yeah.
Would you like it?
I probably would never use it, honestly. I don't really have any desire to gamble. I'm not a gambling person. I like having known rewards and stuff like that. So I don't gamble, and I don't see a need for it in the game. I think that there's plenty of other things you could do in a pirate game that make games piratey without needing gambling.
Yeah, I also don't really like gambling, but it's more these social interactions, and it gives you something to interact with, other crews as well. That isn't just PvP, but it's something social, and you can talk and you can laugh, and then you can shoot them in the face if you lose. Like, yeah, stuff like that. That's appealing to me.
Yeah. I did take a look on Microsoft's Xbox game ratings, and the real gambling is betting-like behavior. So anything that's considered a betting-like behavior would be something that would push it into a mature rated game.
Oh well, too bad, but alas. Well, thank God they have other stuff in this game as well.
Yeah.
So before we discuss the lore, just a few more things about these forts from a gameplay perspective. How do you feel these forts impact the PvP element of the game?
It's tough to say because it's kind of on players to make that agreement, right? Like you have to have a reason to go to a sea fort to PvP, and the only reason that a person would go to another fort for PvP is the promise of treasure and engagement. So I think that it's tough. One of the interesting things that I think that came from this update is the giant map that's on the wall in all of the sea forts. They don't show Reapers compared to the map tables in your ship. So if you're relying on the map inside a fort to tell you if a Reaper's coming, you better go up to the top of the fort and take a look, because you're not going to be able to tell just based off the map. So I think it gives Reapers an opportunity that they wouldn't normally have to be able to sneak up on a fort. But at the same time, it's tough because, the only way you're going to be able to clean out a fort is if you actually sink the ship that's there to be able to kill the players so they aren't able to respawn. So I think it improves the PvP to an extent, but I think that as players get familiar with the forts, they're going to be able to get away from players a lot easier. There's plenty of ladders on the outside of the fort to get up to higher areas. There's plenty of line of sight points for bullets. So you can go up and down stairs. There's hatches to be able to drop down from one floor to another to get away from a player. And there's tons of fruit everywhere. So I think as far as like a balance goes, I think PvP on a fort is going to be more annoying than if it were just a ship to ship thing, or if you were just attacking, if you were going on, say like a regular skeleton fort and attacking someone there, because there's not too many places to hide on a skeleton fort. Whereas with a sea fort, there's so many ways to get away from other people, and there's so many little areas that you can kind of like tuck on, or barrels that you can become. It's going to be a lot harder to deal with PvP on a fort and stuff, which opens it up for tuckers. If tuckers want to be able to sneak onto a fort, there's a lot more opportunities now.
Yep, there certainly is. And it's also a different experience defending it as well with the cannons. I wouldn't say it's on one hand, it might be easier because you have cannons from all sides. They are also really big, so you kind of lose your angle a bit quicker too. I feel like need to test a little bit out, a little bit more, but it is fun. I like defending forts from attackers for sure.
Yeah. You get the benefit of not having the sway with a ship with the cannons, but at the same time, they're a lot more limited on their range and stuff. But I haven't really gotten a chance to defend a fort yet. I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays, because it seems like they've thought a lot about, being able to offer multiple angles. So the nice thing about the forts is that they don't take damage like a ship would, so you don't have to worry about the fort sinking. So any shots that don't kill you don't matter.
Aye, that's true. And something else you mentioned is the Reapers not appearing on the sea map. I actually wanted to save this for message in the bottle, but I think it's better we do this now, because we got a listener question from Banabal, and he asked us, do you think it's a bug or a feature that the sea map doesn't show Reapers? And if it is a feature, do you think it was the right choice?
I do. Again, I think that they don't want you to rely on a giant map that 4 people can look at and interact with to be able to tell where the Reapers are. There's so much of the game is relied upon being out in the open, looking with your eyes and not just relying on the map. They don't want you staring at the map the whole time. So I think not having the Reapers show up on the map adds a bit of anxiety, maybe uncertainty, which kind of keeps you on your guard. You can't just be on the fort and then be like, oh, is there a Reaper coming? Is that Reaper from, such and such a place sailing in? And then you run down to the fort and be able to look and see. It's like, nope, you can't tell, which means you got to be up on top of the fort, which means you got to be using your spyglass to check and see if there are any ships on the horizon. And it forces you to interact with the world instead of just interacting with the table.
Yeah, I guess so. I personally would have preferred if Reapers also showed on the map, because you're not always looking on the map, right? You're just fighting phantoms, and you have to look actively at it, and kind of zoom out and see if somebody's coming. Could be a tactic to focus the map on the fort, so you see when somebody gets close, and every once in a while when you're there, you take a glance at it. To me, it will serve a bigger purpose, that map, than just another map of the Sea of Thieves. So I would have preferred if it showed everything, to be honest. Yeah.
To take a page from your book, not having Reapers show up on the map is a little bit of a hard mode then, huh?
I guess so. There's nothing wrong with using your spyglass. Don't get me wrong. That's also very piratey to do. All right. So the final thing before we go to the lore that I want to discuss are the rewards. What do you think of the rewards you can earn for completing these commendations?
I think they're good for 10 minutes worth of fighting for phantoms that are half the damage of a pirate, and you get about 4 or 5 pieces for each different trade company. I think it's good. I think that it's not meant to be like the way to get gold. Obviously things like Fort of Fortune, for the Damned, bigger voyages, things like that. Those are going to be the way that you want to go get the gold. Like a gold vault requires less time compared to a sea fort, and rewards you with a lot more treasure. Same thing with a what are they called? I always forget the name of them. The Lost Shipments voyages. So there's ways to earn more gold, but it requires a voyage in that aspect.
Yeah, that's true. And you kind of missed my joke, actually.
Oh, I did? Oh no.
I was talking about the cosmetic rewards you can get for completing the commendations.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And there aren't any.
There's none.
So how do you feel about that?
I'm fine with it. Not everything has to give me. Yeah, because nothing. I mean, the forts themselves are fun enough, and the cosmetics that I think you would get from this event were put into the season pass, and I think that the season pass cosmetics this season are better than they're better than what I would expect to normally get in a season, and I'm fine with that. I think the Spanish naval commander for the season is what they is what you would normally get if there weren't seasons and this had cosmetics. The difference is that the way you earn the cosmetics this time is not through commendations, it's through renown.
All right. I agree that I do like the rewards you do get from the seasonal pass, because I really want to role play as a fat Spanish commander.
Right?
I'm also really happy that it looks really good on my fat pirate, but still, like, I have nothing to show for completing these forts and completing these commendations. I don't know. It feels not that great, if I'm being completely honest.
I can see that. I mean, I definitely understand where a lot of people are coming from. Again, it goes back to wanting to show off the cosmetics that you get to other people. And the way to do that is to be out in the world doing that. And to do that, you should be doing the content that's fresh to the game. I think the difference here is that we're only seeing a part of the season's worth of content. I think that we will get cosmetics through content, but I think that content has yet to come for the season.
All right. Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so. I wanted to say something. I think I forgot it. Yeah, no, I forgot it. Never mind. We'll just go. We'll just continue on with the lore right now, because there is some lore and some things are a little bit unclear. The thing I do really like about these forts, that unlike, say, the Ashen Lords, for example, they were just there with little story to them. But these forts, they've been handling that for a while, right? We had the Flameheart teasers where I think they spoke about forts made of stone or something in that line. Then we had the adventure that weakened the barrier between the Sea of the Damned and the Sea of Thieves. We also had these ghostly apparitions of these forts, which you could use on that spyglass to already see what they would look like with a bit more color. And now finally, right, the apparitions are made solid and we can tackle these forts. How do you feel about this from a lore perspective?
I think there's something that is being said without being said. And I think that there's a really good opportunity for them to kind of explain more as we get closer and closer towards like the next bit of content for the season. But right now, I think they've done a really good job of tying these into the lore with a couple exceptions. And I think it's Mercy's End, which is one of the Wilds sea forts.
Yep, correct.
Yeah, so if you know what I'm talking about, then you'll totally see where I'm coming from. But each of the different sea forts have their own perspective, or not their own perspective, their own personality based on where they're located. And Mercy's End is one that if you go in there in the mess hall, there is a giant kraken skull above the hearth in for the fireplace, which is really cool. They've got one there, they've got one above the table. But it makes me wonder, these are sea forts for Spanish commanders from the Sea of the Damned. Are there Krakens in the Sea of the Damned? Were these sea forts in Sea of Thieves at some point to be able to know what a Kraken is? Like, how did they get Kraken skulls for a sea fort that, as far as we know, may or may not have been in the Sea of Thieves at some point? Because these are memories. They're brought in from the Sea of the Damned. From what we can tell, but there's no record of sea forts at all ever in the Sea of Thieves. The closest thing we have is the small bits of rubble on certain islands where it looks like there used to be stone homes there. So this is the first time that we've really experienced anything that is as developed as something that we would expect from a colonial aspect. And it makes me question like the design of them. It's cool. It looks awesome. It's exactly what I would want for my own fort and stuff. But it doesn't really explain like how where did they get that? Because these are just the memories of these sailors and stuff. So were they in Sea of Thieves? Were colonials? Were Spanish colonizers or Spanish soldiers in Sea of Thieves with sea forts before? Because that's kind of where I want to know where the lore comes in. There's plenty that they've done a really good job of as far as like designing things. But I did love the fact that they had the ghostly apparitions of the forts before we actually got to see them. And you could use Wanda's spyglass to kind of get a good look at them and be able to do that. I am kind of bummed that the blank portraits in the sea forts don't have a hidden Easter egg when you look at them through Wanda's spyglass. I was kind of hoping that if you look through them, you could see like the masked stranger or something on them, but there's nothing there.
Huh. Nice that you tested out at least. And you're also asking the most important questions that we don't really have the answers for. We do know they are memories that are made solid, and that they are Spanish memories, but that's about it. Like, we don't really know. Like, I know Ray, a Shining Ray, has a theory about this, which I'm not really going to go into this podcast in case he makes a video about it. But he suspected them coming earlier to the Sea of Thieves in search for the Fountain of Youth. That's also why the chalice is as one of the symbols on the sea forts.
Yeah. I have two ideas about that as well. And yeah, one of them definitely kind of leans towards the idea of the Fountain of Youth. The other one kind of leans more towards the influence of Wanda and the Masked Stranger and the Reaper's bones and stuff. So kind of depends on who you're talking to. There's also the Holy Grail. If Krakens are a thing in the world, and megalodons and mystical creatures like that, then obviously religious crusades could also be a tide to that. Spanish were looking for the Holy Grail. If they wanted to, that would be another thing.
Yeah, could be. I think we'll get the answers sooner than later.
Yeah.
Especially since the second adventure is going to be called Forts of the Forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're definitely going to do more with the forts in the second adventure. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, another hint. I don't know if I wrote it down. Oh, I did wrote it down. That is that in the title screen we see a ship, like a ship model, but that's actually a ship model with the cosmetics of the hunters of the killer whale. So that's Merrick's ship on the title screen in the jaws of a megalodon. So also going back to the teasers for the Flamer Junior teasers we got, I think they spoke about the hunter's ship. Well, I think people can put two and two together. They're definitely meaning Merrick's ship, the killer whale. So yeah, interesting. But what do you think that's all about?
I think there's something that is yet to be said that I'm still doing research on, because I got a tip from one of my listeners that told me to go check out Merrick and talk to him. I haven't had an opportunity to go talk to him yet, but I do think that it harkens back to the idea of the Hungering One, where we needed to carry the tune for being able to summon the Hungering One from Merrick with the drum, and requiring a certain number of people. You needed 6 people to be able to do that. I think Rare is teasing out the idea that akin to the original event, something will come in the coming weeks that will help kind of illuminate that idea of why Merrick's ship is there. Also, Merrick's ship, the killer whale, was something that was used in part to build up the Reaper's hideout as well too. So there's a little bit of Wanda had some doing and twisted something that was normally just a shipwreck into what became the killer whale turned into the Reaper's hideout. And the killer whale being a little ship model in the title screen suggests to me that the sea forts are something that will eventually get twisted into whatever Wanda wants with the future of those sea forts. Like those sea forts are there for a thing. We're in the season of Dark Relics. There's plenty of little teases around all of the forts that indicate that there's rituals happening, whether it be scrolls on the wall or Wanda's pirate code on above the table in the actual the bedroom. There's lots of little things that kind of tease out the idea of Merrick's ship was just Merrick's ship until Wanda came along, and then when Wanda came along, she turned it into the Reaper's hideout. Sea forts were just sea forts until Wanda came along, and then when Wanda came along, we got sea forts of the damned, something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Wanda had a falling out with Flameheart, and it's through Flameheart and Flameheart Junior that these forts appeared in the Sea of Thieves. So I don't really feel that Wanda has a lot to do with these, but you feel differently apparently.
I do, and because of if you go to the bedroom in some of the sea forts, you'll actually see Wanda's pirate code tacked up there.
Mm. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But isn't that just more the older pirate code that the Reapers also use?
Um,
Like, didn't she write it down because that was Flameheart's vision as well?
if it was Flameheart's vision, then Wanda was the only one that knew about it because it's not posted anywhere on the Reaper's hideout that I've ever seen. It's only ever been in Wanda's workshop.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm not. I don't know, man. I feel that she wrote that down because it was Flameheart's wish, and Flameheart still feels that way, and he is involved with these forts, and that's why his alternate pirate code is up there as well.
Yeah, it's possible. I think there's a character that's being or that we haven't heard from in a while that may influence the sway of like what's going on between Flameheart and the Servant of Flame.
I used to hate this kind of stuff. This not getting these definitive answers, but the more I get into the lore, and also the more I talk with Shiny Ray, the more I actually like piecing it together and speculating and slowly getting the real answers.
It's kind of like working on a really hard fort and having that sense of accomplishment.
I guess so. I guess so. Coming back through all the the potential rituals that are going on with these forts, the biggest one is actually way down on the prisoner cell level in the prisoner cell, and there's some sort of ritual going on, like some circles on the ground and three persons in that circle. So what do you think that's about?
If I had to point to the obvious thing and call out Occam's razor, I would say that it's something to do with Wanda. I imagine that if and I do think that they're going to. It is kind of akin to Wanda's influence in the Sea of Thieves, whether it's Wanda or whether it's a Servant of Flame. I think dark rituals are going to play a part in those, and I think that we will be able to fight a boss, whether it be the Soul Flame Captain, and I think in a future event or a future adventure, we will be able to kill the Soul Flame Captain. The Soul Flame Captain will drop a prison key. That prison key can be taken to any of the sea forts and unlocked the prison cell in there. Once you're there, you can take the Soul Flame Captain's skull and place it into the ritual, or a dark relic and put it into the ritual circle, and the circle will then spawn the crew of the Soul Flame Captain. And you will then have to complete the fort all over again, but now with harder enemies. That's kind of my theory going right now.
You've heard it here first, guys. Or second, if you also talked about it in your podcast.
No, I haven't talked about it yet. This is exclusive.
All right, nice, very nice. I love it. That's why you should also subscribe to both our channels.
Yeah.
So the final thing I want to mention that has to do with the lore is the symbols that are on these forts. Obviously, they indicate the different regions. You have the lock for the wilds, and also the names of those forts are named for being a prison. And you have the shores of plenty. They're more regal names. And then they also have the the crown symbol. And in the ancient isles, we have the chalice, which is a very interesting choice. So do you feel there's a lot of lore behind these symbols, or are they more there to differentiate the the different regions?
I'm not sure. I don't really have a theory right now. I would hope that they do. I just don't know that we have been presented enough information to be able to really point to those and be like, that's the reason why. I think there is. I just don't think that it's kind of like when you go do Pirate's Life Tall Tale 3 and you head into the second part of that actual Tall Tale, where you actually go wander around the sea fort that's in the Sea of the Damned. There are banners there that have like a crossed swords with a crown. And a lot of us felt like that was the Grand Maritime Union, but it never really was exactly like what we've seen the Grand Maritime Union to be based on the comics. The iconography is different, just slightly, but different enough to be able to lead to discrepancies. So I feel like there is actually reasons behind these symbols. Obviously, they designed them for a reason. They're not all the same, so there's differences for some reason in there. And I think, again, I think it's going to kind of lean into the idea that there's a potential for you to have a harder version of one of these things. And I think that, it might come in the form of like, take X item, whether it be a relic or a skull or something, and take it to one of the chalice forts. And, if you find like a chalice of a dark relic, then you can only take it to one of those chalices or chalice forts to be able to summon the ritual to whatever to do at the fort. And likewise with the lock and the crown, they've been using that kind of iconography for a while. I think they could use that to kind of tease out a way to kind of add mysteries to the game in the form of additional content that comes later on.
Yeah, that's true. The crown was also on the Imperial Sovereign set.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen that before. And also now also on the Spanish Naval Commander outfit, it's the same crown as well.
Yep. We also have the party crown as well.
The party crown?
Yeah, for the party boat cosmetics.
Oh, I guess it's the same crown too. All right, I guess so, yeah. But it's cool that they think of ahead of these things, or even reuse, some of the symbolism they've used before. So I really like the interconnected, the interconnection, this world building they're doing. They're doing a good job with that.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's pretty nice. It was really good, this lore discussion. Obviously we expect to get definitive answers later, but I definitely think we give the listeners something to think and speculate about, and that's the least we can do in this podcast, right?
Totally. Yeah, they better at least.
So are you ready to go to the message in the bottle?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so the message in the bottle is a segment of the podcast where our listeners can send in their own questions, and we answer them. It's as simple as that. So if you want to send your own questions, you can join the Salty Hippo Discord. Link will be in the description, at least in the YouTube version of this podcast, since, hey, haven't you heard? We're also on Spotify right now. So we already answered Benabal's question about, do you think it's a bug or feature that the Reapers show on the map table? So let's go to the next question. This comes from Walsh. If you could change one thing about the sea forts, what would it be and why?
That's really interesting. I think if there was something that I could change about the sea forts, that's really interesting. Gosh, there's so much that I actually really like about the sea forts that it's hard to really say. I would like for them to have, because right now some of the sea forts, they spawn a collector's chest in them, and not all of them do. I would love to have a storage crate, a collector's chest, and a rowboat spawn whenever a sea fort resets. So that way, if you wanted to load up your treasure onto the rowboat, you could definitely do that and use that waterway exit to be able to get your treasure out. Likely, I would love to have a collector's chest at every fort to make it a little bit easier to scoop up all that stuff from the top decks and be able to bring them down to the bottom deck for loading. The other thing that I think I would like to change about sea forts that I'm blanking on that I just had, I'm trying to think, what would I wanted to have changed at the sea forts? I definitely wanted a rowboat. I definitely wanted a storage crate and a collector's chest. There was one other thing that I'm struggling to remember what it is, but let me let you go and see if I can remember it. But those are kind of the main things. I really do like the sea forts. I think they've done a great job designing them.
Yeah, it's a really hard question to answer, actually, because I think they're pretty well made as is. Like, obviously, you could say I made them a bit more difficult, but I don't really agree with that. I think everything is pretty well balanced. If I would change one thing, maybe even a little bit less loot, to be honest. But maybe that's just me. What also could be really cool, because we can't earn those wraith cannonballs anymore, right? Because the flame art event disappeared, and there's still accommodation attached to that.
We can.
Sorry.
No, if you have a higher Any voyage above level 51 on the Order of Souls Phanta or Ghost Fleet voyages has a chance to spawn in Flameheart's ship, which will drop the crate for the Wraith Balls.
I didn't know that. Was it in the patch notes?
Not these patch notes, but the one prior.
All right. Well, I didn't see it. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know that, so that's good. So if I would change, I wouldn't change anything. Oh, I know what I would do. Make it so you can put up your own flag at the top of the fort.
Yeah, I'd
bit
love that.
Bit of a cop-out question because we already discussed it, but there you go.
It's tough. I remembered what it was. Not all of the forts have weapon boxes. There was one that I went to go change my weapon, and I couldn't because they didn't have an equipments chest, and my crew had already left me. And I wanted to be able to check the portraits for any kind of Easter egg using Wanda Spyglass. So I thought the next best thing would be to switch over to the Reaper's Heart Eye of Reach. Well, not all of the sea forts have weapon boxes, so you can't change your weapons. So I would make sure that all the weapon boxes or all the sea forts have weapon boxes as well. So if you want to be able to change your loadout, you can.
Yeah, that's good. And to bring it back too, because you're never out of ammo too, because they always drop these ammo pouches, but there are also a lot of ammo boxes on these sea forts, and makes for a very pleasant experience. Yeah, it's good. I also wanted to say something else, but I keep forgetting this stuff. Oh, I remember the loading screens as well, right? I don't know if you noticed that, but in the loading screens of this update, it also shows other loot in the vault of these sea forts, like a stronghold chest for the damned. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have, yeah. Again, I think it kind of goes back to the idea that these are not the final form of sea forts. I think there's going to be.
You don't think it's a mistake that they changed the loot?
No, I think because they pushed out the Pirate Legend content, there's a whole lot more to the season that we haven't gotten yet, and I think some of it's going to tie to the next adventure, and I think that we'll find out more later on because the artwork is done well in advance for the loading screens.
Yeah, that's why I think it could be a mistake, right? If they figured out, maybe we should lessen the loot, and we already have the loading screen. All right, let's keep the loading screen, but we still have lessened the loot. You don't feel that's the case?
It's definitely a possibility, but I think that it's something like with the loading screens is far more intentional than accidentally forgetting which items are turned on for a video for a music video and stuff. I think that this is something that we'll see in the future. It has, I will say, yes, they have put in cosmetics into loading screens and imagery that has never made it to the game. So I know that has happened in the past, but I think until the end of season 6, I will reserve judgment on whether or not this was a mistake or if this was just something that got out after they had to push back content. So when I've seen everything, then I'll reserve judgment till then. But until season 7, I think that it's intentional, and we just haven't seen why yet. All
right, I hope so, because if season 7 does roll out, we have new loading screens. So I don't know. But I do hope you're right. Like a way to increase the challenge and increase, the loot for these forts is very much welcome. Which also ties into the next question of Uncle Albert 123, and his question is: would you buff the loot within the sea forts? Would you or not, and why?
I would if there was a way to trigger it again, and it's something. Obviously, there's been a narrative thread that I've been weaving here. I think that there's a harder mode coming, and I think it ties to Dark Relics, and I think that the harder loot is something that they teased in the loading screens, and I think that is how we're going to be able to gain access to some of that phantom skeleton loot that we've seen.
Yeah. So the next question, it hasn't to do anything with these forts, but it's still a good question. Comes from SGM Jam. Do you think Rare will actually create bosses with different abilities? The Ashen Lords were a start, but they were just still bullet sponges. So new bosses with different abilities.
I hope so. That kind of stuff takes a lot of development time. And I think they want to do that. I think it just comes down to being able to test to make sure that it works, being able to think of what would be really cool. I think that it's tough to say because the skeleton lords and the ashen lords are unlike regular skeletons. Regular skeletons are just player skeletons based off of AI. They use the same game inputs that we use to be able to pull out a banana, to be able to fire a gun, to be able to swing a sword. And the ashen lords and skeleton lords are not. They are driven off of mechanics, and those mechanics are based on timers and player interaction. So I think that I would love to see new bosses. I would love to see bosses that are more diverse in their attacks, but I recognize that I might have to wait a while. We just got ocean crawlers and phantoms are more unique than skeletons. They're a lot faster. Ocean crawlers all have their own unique fights and things like that, but if it comes to a boss, yeah, I would love to see a unique boss. But at the same time, that boss is going to probably have to take a lot of time and investment to be able to develop that. You know, it took a full year of them working on Gold Hoarder, and Gold Hoarder was the first instance of that, along with like Briggsy and Captain Morrow. So I think there's opportunities there. I would love to see more diverse bosses, but I think it's going to take time, and I'm willing to wait.
Yeah, same, and I totally agree with that too. When the Ashen Lords came out, I was a little bit disappointed that you don't really do extra damage when you hit them in the heart. That felt so weird. Like, it doesn't really matter where you hit them. But I guess that's true for everything in Sea of Thieves, including other players. But I do hope that that eventually the other bosses, especially if they're going to do like a flame art boss or anything like that, it will definitely have a weak spot, or a tactic to expose his weak spot instead of just shooting and hitting him wherever.
Yeah, it's hard because they want to imply that, or they don't want to start creating crit spots for bosses and then have people think that crit spots are things for players as well. You got to keep that design language the same so that it doesn't make sense. Like, why can I shoot a skeleton in the head and get 2 times damage on it, but I can't do that for players? Until they get the whole combat balance thing worked out. I think they have to be very cautious about what kind of expectations they start building into enemies that get translated to players, and the discrepancies between there.
Aye, indeed. We still have 2 questions left, so let's answer these quickly. The first one is from Teaser. What do you think is the importance of the prison cell, and when do you think it will come out? So this is a very interesting question, since Rare has been teasing the importance of this prison cell too. I think they posted on their YouTube community tab. Hey, has anybody seen the key to this prison cell? So what do you think? That's something more to it?
I kind of spoke on this earlier. I think it ties to the next adventure that's coming out. I think that's when we'll find out where this prison cell is, and I think they're just being cheeky about it. But I think it deals with the relics and the season overall.
Yep, totally agree. And the final question comes from Firebird and Z. Should the forts become more homely when they are finished, like fires lit, lanterns brighter, less cobwebs? Just a more lived-in fort instead of the empty, abandoned feel when you normally finish the fort?
I wouldn't mind having a few more interactables with the forts. Yeah, like being able to turn off the fireplace or turn it back on, being able to kind of move the tables or move the chairs, things like that. I mean, it kind of gets into Sims territory when you start going into that aspect, which I think a lot of people would enjoy, but I think other games serve that design better. Yes and no. I think also people just enjoy kind of the ghostly look. Like, I would love to have kind of like the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland. You see ghosts kind of going about their normal business in that ride. I would love to see little ghosts, like pop up, or little phantoms pop up from time to time, kind of like straightening a portrait, or closing a door. You just kind of see them out looking onto the horizon from one of the turrets, and just kind of see that. So I would actually go the opposite direction. I would like a little more ghostly presence at the sea forts when I've occupied them.
I'm not really wanting them to to make the it's super clean as well, but a few more interactables are indeed nicer. Making the hearth on and off yourself, or burning those cobwebs with your lantern. Why not? Stuff like that. Just more interaction, right? It's always welcome.
Yeah.
All right, so those are all the questions. So thanks again to those that submitted their questions, and again, make sure to join the Salty Hippo Discord if you want to submit your own. So yeah, this is the end of the podcast. So I want to thank our honored guest, Captain Logun, for joining us today. And can you tell our listeners where they can find your content?
Sure. Yeah. If you guys enjoyed my discussion here, you might enjoy the rest of it over on the Keelhauled Podcast. Just look up Sea of Thieves in any of your podcatcher, and you'll see the official Sea of Thieves, and then you'll see mine. Go with both, and that way you can enjoy the devs talking about the game, and then me talking about the devs about the game that they're talking about. Other than that, you can head over to Twitter. I'm on Twitter at CAPT_LOGUN. You can usually hit me up there, or if you want, you can always reach me over on the Salty Hippo Discord. I'm in there as well too if you want to tag me.
Oh, that's very, very nice. And I'll make sure I'll link your YouTube channel in the description as well, so people can click on it and they're at your podcast straight away. And you can find, that's what we do. That's why you're on. Yeah. We promote each other. And you can find me on YouTube at Captain Blubber. Just type in Captain Blubber and you will find me. Again, don't forget, this podcast is also on Spotify. So if you want to listen to me while driving to work or staring at your ceiling, you can. So make sure you give this podcast a thumbs up. That's always appreciated. And let us know how you feel about DC Forts in the comments. So that's it. Thanks again. Drink some grog, do something daring, and have an amazing day. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.